I haven't seen the entire list that's being talked about here, but a couple of the things that have been mentioned are not earmarks. And I don't know why the gentleman continues to characterize them as such. The Plum Creek, first of all, this is not an earmark. It does not define Plum Creek. What it says is that these bonds can be used for any habitat conservation plans that protect native fish or any forest land covered by these habitat conservation plans. We know of at least 7 habitat conservation plans that would qualify under this provision, so therefore it's not an earmark. The Cedar River Watershed Habitat Conservation Plan in King County, Washington, the Plum Creek Timber Plan, which is also in Washington, the Washington Department of Natural Resources Forest Practices Habitat Conservation Plan in Washington, the West Fork Timber Plan in Washington, the Plum Creek Native Fish Habitat Conservation Plan in Montana and Idaho, Green Diamond and Pacific Lumber, both in California. So this is not an earmark because it would, any of these would qualify, and there's probably more that we don't know about. Now this was in the Senate bill. So I don't know what you're talking about, airdrop. Couple of the others that I heard you mention were also in the Senate bill. And the one that, there's another one that you characterize as an earmark, which is not an earmark, and that's the Salmon Recovery Disaster Plan, which was a plan that was actually first passed in the 2006 Congress by the Republican majority, was implemented in 2006. $50 million at that time was put out to the people that were in the commercial fishing industry, primarily off the coast of California. At that time, there was a partial shutdown of the salmon season. Now, this year, we have a complete shutdown of the salmon season all along the coast, from California to Oregon to Washington State. So it's much broader, and it not only shut down the commercial fishing, it shut down the recreational fishing in those areas. And so what we're doing is replenishing this disaster fund with money that is exactly similar to what was done, what was in the statute, and it was actually dispersed in 2006. Because the disaster is much bigger this year than it was in 2006, because we had a partial shutdown. Now we have an entire shutdown of 3 states. So this is clearly not an earmark. This is in the disaster title of the Farm Bill that goes along with the other disaster provisions that are in the Farm Bill. So, I don't know, I guess because apparently some people think that being against earmarks is popular and whatever, they are trying to make this into an issue. But a number of the provisions that were raised by the gentleman are clearly not earmarks. The House bill that passed out of here had no earmarks. We had to deal with the other body, and we took some provisions from the other body because that's how a conference works. There's a lot worse stuff that was in that bill that we took out. So I just want to clear the record that a number of the things being talked about here are not earmarks, and I would encourage my colleagues not to support this point of order and reserve the balance of the time.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from Arizona.
Madam Inquires the time remaining.
4 minutes.
Thank the gentleman. Gentleman mentioned the National Marine Fisheries Service earmark. It was added at the last minute. It may have been in a 2006 bill, but it wasn't in this bill until it was airdropped into the conference report. $170 million. Now that may well be a disaster there, but why in the world, if it is a disaster, isn't it covered in the, I will.
Oh, the House bill didn't have a disaster, paid for disaster provision in it. The Senate bill did. And so when we molded these together, we put these disaster provisions in and we paid for them. First time that we actually paid for disasters with pay-as-you-go money, and we included the California disaster in the process and paid for it. This is not a new program. As I said, it's not an earmark, and it was brought in because we were dealing with disaster. This is clearly a disaster. Any place that you have a complete shutdown of a commercial fishery, they're going to be in asking for help from the federal government. That's appropriate. So this was brought in when we brought in the permanent disaster program from the Senate and funded it, and we added it together.
Gentleman reclaims his time. Gentleman from Arizona.
I thank the gentleman for the clarification. I still would point out we have a $3.8 billion permanent disaster title added to the bill. And still, in addition to that, we're funding these kind of programs directly and specifically. And the gentleman can argue that it's not an earmark. I think that a casual or tortured reading of this would both say that that's an earmark when you're naming a specific entity to receive a specific amount of money, and when it wasn't in the House bill, that's an earmark.